welcome to my December book review. These are all the books that I read in December, and there are 19 of them. We're going to start with fantasy. I read 4 books that I'm classifying as fantasy in December. The first is A Fire in the Flesh by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So this is the 3rd book in the Flesh and Fire series. There is a 4th book, but it doesn't come out till May of 2024. So just know if you're going to start this series, you've got to wait a minute before the next book comes out. Although I will say, this one wrapped up kind of nicely. Like, I'm actually surprised there's going to be a 4th book. I think the 4th book is going to probably bring together A Fire in the Flesh, or the Flesh and Fire series, with the Blood and Ash series, because the 2 series by Jennifer L. Armentrout are very much intertwined. So in this book, our love interests are really fighting to be together. Like, the first one is their meeting, the second book is them falling in love, and then this 3rd book is their fighting to be together. And like I said, it wraps up kind of nicely. So I've enjoyed this series a lot. I was concerned that I wouldn't like the Flesh and Fire series because I was so into the Blood and Ash series. This one goes like further back. It's set before Blood and Ash, but I did really like it, although the stories are so similar and so intertwined. So just know that if you're going to read one of the series, you might as well just commit to reading both. Okay, next in the fantasy grouping, I read The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. And this was billed as a standalone book, not part of a series, or starting actually a new series. So it's the first book in a new series, but the second book hasn't come out yet. And the first 100 pages of it, you can see it's a big book. The first 100 pages of it, I was very confused. I was like, I feel like I'm missing something here. Well, as it turns out, the characters and the world that is in this book is part of another series that V.E. Schwab has written. And so I think that's why I was confused. There's some like assumption on the author's part that we would have already read those other books, even though this is billed as a standalone book. So just keep that in mind. I do want to go back and read the other series now that kind of sets up these worlds. The idea here is that there's 4 different worlds like sitting on top of each other, and magic is emanating from the base and then kind of out to the others. And so there's lesser magic in some worlds than others, but they're all the same place, all the same location. And there's certain magicians that can move between the worlds. And there's, something controlling the magic or preventing the magic from getting out. And the characters that can move between the worlds are trying to resolve that on their own little adventure. So it flips back and forth both in time and in location, with the varying characters being in different worlds and at different points in time. So it can get really confusing. I did ultimately enjoy the book, but it took me a minute to get into this one. Next up is The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. And this is the follow-up book to the Atlas 6. So this is the 2nd book in the series. There is a 3rd book that comes out this month, January of 2024. And I've pre-ordered that so I can complete my series. I will say I love the Atlas 6. I did not love the Atlas Paradox. So the premise is that there are magicians in the world, and they have varying levels of power, and 6 of the most powerful magicians with different specialties are chosen to become part of this society that helps protect magic. But it's got some underlying evil, and people are being manipulative, and the magicians don't actually know that. So the first book ends on a cliffhanger with one of them being kind of taken, and in this book they're still trying to search for the one that's being taken, but also understand what's happening and how they're being manipulated. So this was a little bit chaotic and not in a good way. Like I had, again, trouble following because there were big jumps in time. There were some assumptions made that you would understand. There were chapters told by different characters. So you weren't getting this kind of super linear storytelling. That being said, I am anxious to read the third book, and hopefully the third book will kind of wrap it all up nicely, because I really enjoyed the first book. Any book that's like about magic. It kind of reminded me of the show The Magicians, where they all like go to school and have different strengths and work together to figure stuff out. So if you like that kind of thing, check this out. Check out the series. Now, I have recently come across some other stuff that Olivia Blake has written that I'm going to check out hopefully in the next few weeks. So it'll be outside of this series, and we can talk about that when I read those. Okay, last in the fantasy grouping is The Kingdom of Sweets by Erica Johansson. And I'm sorry to say, I hated this book. It is a retelling of The Nutcracker, and I don't know that I've ever really heard the full story of the Nutcracker, so I can't tell you how close to the real story it is. But in this particular one, a set of twin girls were born on Christmas Day, and their godfather is a magician, and he blesses one and curses the other. So one lives this kind of very full, glamorous life, and the other one is very much forgotten and in the shadows and doesn't get favored treatment by her parents. And on their 16th birthday, the beautiful one, Clara, is given a nutcracker that takes her to a sweet fantasy world. And Natasha, the ugly one, somehow follows in. And once they're in this fantasy world, she kills Clara and assumes her identity and then goes on to live her life. And so the complex part of this is like kind of the magic and the motivations behind all of the characters. It was just super not clear, and I really struggled through this book. I made myself finish it, but I would love for somebody to tell me why this is a good book, because I just could not get into it. Okay, our next genre is going to be mystery. So first up is The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. And I love this book. This is a follow-up book to The Maid by the same author. The Maid is a character who is very like socially awkward, but very bright. And she works at this boutique hotel and was taught and raised and taught by her grandmother to, you know, live life in a certain way and follow certain rules, and is very particular about how she cleans and how everything has to be a certain way. So in the first book, there's a murder that she helps solve after she's kind of accused of being a part of it. And then in the second book, same thing. There's a murder in the hotel, and because she is so observant and recognizes details, she has a way of helping the police out, even though they don't really want her help. But with this book, we get more of her background, because in some ways she's like weirdly connected to the murder victim. So you learn more about her background and how she grew up and kind of why she is the way she is. And of course it sets it up to have more books in the future, so I'm excited about that. She's kind of a detective in her own way. So this is very cute and it's fun. I really like this series. The next mystery that I read was The Inheritance Games, which is also part of the series. God, I love a series. So The Inheritance Games is a YA series, and the idea here is that a teenager inherits billions of dollars from a stranger, and as a result of that inheritance, she is required to live in his house for at least a year. Now, the whole rest of his family lives in that house as well, all of these people that were passed over for the inheritance. And Tobias Hawthorne was the billionaire that has died, and he left all of these clues. He liked games and riddles, kind of a Mr. Limoncello's library. Like, that's for the little kids, and the Inheritance Games is for the big kids, where they, you know, run around the mansion trying to find these clues and understand what's happening. And it's got some love interest. There's a little bit of a love triangle thing going on, and there's lives put at risk, so it's got some danger added to it, but a lot of these, you know, just mind games and riddles that are interesting and fun to hear them to plan out. So I've really enjoyed that book. I'm listening to it as an audiobook, and I have actually on the second or third book now, so more to come on those. The last book in the mystery category is The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and if you're familiar with Riley Sager books, then you know they are twisty-turny and can get really, really dark. And this one was no different. So I did listen to this one as an audiobook as well. Actually, my husband and I listened to it on our road trip for holiday vacations, and we were both super into it. Like, we couldn't wait to get back in the car to find out what was going on with Lenora. So the main character is Lenora, who is you know, 70, 80-year-old woman who is paralyzed and can't talk and needs home health care. And her home health care nurse is Kit. And we know that something has happened in Kit's past that has made her not really hireable in her chosen profession. So when she's offered the job as Lenora's nurse, she pretty much has to take it. But Lenora is rumored to have killed both of her parents and her sister back in 1929. So the book is set in the 1980s. And it's in this mansion that's kind of falling apart. Well, not kind of, I mean, it's literally falling apart. So Kit is trying to come to terms with caring for Lenora, who she thinks is a killer. And Lenora can actually move just her left hand and can type on a typewriter messages to Kit, and she wants to tell her her story. And so as Kit is kind of unraveling that with Lenora, she's discovering things outside of that and trying to put the whole story together. So it's very dark and twisty and turny, but it is good. So if you like kind of murder mysteries, this is a good one. I really liked The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Let's go into some, I'm calling this category women's fiction. So first up is Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. And I loved this book so much. It's one of those ones that was getting such great reviews, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to read it. It looks like it might be sad or slow or something like that. It is none of those things. It is just lovely. So the premise here is that a woman named Laura, who lives on and runs a cherry farm with her husband and has 3 daughters, is home with all the daughters. It is set during COVID, but that is not a primary thing in this book, because I have been avoiding the COVID-themed books for a while now, but that just gives them all a reason to be in the same place, but it's not something that's talked about throughout the whole book. So she's got her 3 adult daughters there, and they're asking her about the time that she was an actress and that she dated a now very famous actor. And so she's telling that story, and in it involves how she met her current husband and everybody's role in kind of building up that love story and putting it all together. And it's just, there's some secrets that are revealed that are nice and surprising, and it moves very quickly. This is a very lovely, lovely book. Love story, great book. The other book that I read that kind of falls into that women's fiction category, which I guess could kind of fall into a romance category too, but I didn't classify it as romance, is The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella. And in it, a woman is just tired of her job. Everything is driving her crazy. And it starts off really funny because she just feels like she has no way to escape and leaves her office to go straight to a convent and says that she wants to become a nun. And the nun is like, I don't think this is right for you, ends up calling her office. She has an accident when she's leaving, like just running into a brick wall, and ends up in the hospital, and the doctor says, you need to take some time off. So like prescribed time off. So she goes to a little vacation beach town that she used to go to when she was a kid, and the journey there is really funny, and she gets there and stays at this place that she always used to stay that was kind of fabulous, and now it's kind of run down. Like scaffolding in front of her beach view window. I mean, everything that can go wrong goes wrong. But she's staying there for several weeks, and she's at odds with one of the other guests because, you know, apparently he's there alone, having some issues with his job as well, and they clash immediately, and you can see where that's going to end up. So I had a little bit of a hard time getting into this book, but I ended up really enjoying it as they kind of work out their differences and solve issues related to work and kind of getting back into life that they had the luxury of taking all of these weeks off. I mean, who has that luxury? And then going back to their existing jobs. I wish that were the case in real life, but alas, it is not. It's a sweet book though. Last category is romance. As has been the case with me for the past year plus, romance makes up the majority of my reading from the past month. So let's get into it. First up is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is also a movie. The movie has been out for a bit now. In fact, I've watched it maybe half a dozen times. I really, really like it. And every time I watch the movie, I was like, you know, I really should read the book because I bet that I would like the book as well. There's probably more in there. And I was definitely right. I loved the book as well. There's a reason it was made into a movie, and because I'd seen the movie, I could like picture the characters. And so the idea here is that a man and a woman are each assistants to the co-CEOs of their publishing company. So we love a book about books, right? And they have to share an office, and they couldn't be any more different. They just are constantly irritating each other and trying to one-up each other and as to how much they can irritate them. And ultimately they end up competing for the same job, and that kind of like brings all of this to a head. It is a romance novel, so again, you know what's going to happen, but it's enemies to lovers, it's, you know, a colleagues situation, and it's a cute book, and I really, really enjoyed it. Okay, A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. This was also a really cute romance, very sweet. A woman who is raised in London moves to New York after her mom dies because her mom had always told her all these fabulous stories about New York. She's a trained chef, but when she comes to New York, she's kind of working in a kitchen, not really as a professional chef. I mean, she's a chef, but not doing like fine foods. And she goes out and tries to, you know, recreate some of the experiences that her mom told her about, although her mom was never really specific about a lot of different things. And one day she discovers this gelato shop that her mom had pictured in a scrapbook, but she didn't know any of the story behind. So she wanders in, meets the owner, and kind of learns more about the gelato shop and how they've lost their core recipe. And she immediately recognizes it as the recipe her mom has used all of her life. But she doesn't want to tell them that she has their secret recipe, so she tries to work with them to recreate the gelato recipe while their patriarch is in a coma, essentially. So, of course, the gelato shop owner and our main character fall in love, but getting there is kind of a path. And she has a little bit of a dark past because she escaped the previous boyfriend, and, you know, kind of getting all of that revealed is part of the story as well. But I definitely enjoyed this. It's kind of holiday adjacent, but I don't think it has to, you don't think it has to be the holidays for you to enjoy reading this particular one. A Winter in New York. It's good. Okay, The Wake Up Call by Beth O'Leary is about two hotel receptionists, a man and a woman, who are kind of arch enemies. Of course, we've got another enemies to lovers in a workplace setting. They work in a little boutique hotel that has come under some financial strain, resulting in some staffing changes that force them to work together and making them work to sell off some of the lost and found items from the hotel. One of those things is a set of wedding rings, like 4 or 5 different wedding rings. And so they make it a competition between themselves to figure out who the owners are of these wedding rings. And over the course of that, it's a romance. You know what happens. But it's got a cute premise because they're trying to find the wedding rings, and understanding why they didn't like each other in the first place is because the woman had a crush on the guy, and she told him about it in a Christmas card, and then found him making out with her roommate. And that's all like in the first few pages of the book. And so then she hates him, and then they kind of have to go on this whole journey together. But it's sweet, and I liked it. It's also holiday adjacent, but you don't have to have read it during the holidays to enjoy it. Okay, next up is Do Your Worst by Rosie Gannon. And this one is set in Scotland, so that makes it fun. And we've got a curse breaker is the woman, and the man is an archaeologist, and they've both been assigned to this castle to do some investigation. And they're at odds. We're again enemies to lovers in a workplace situation, because he's all science, she's all belief, and they try to sabotage each other, and then it's a romance, so you know what happens. But it's cute. I enjoyed it. It is one that I got through my box subscription to the Ripped Bodice bookstore box subscription, and that's always fun. So a romance book subscription. All right, next up is a book called Not So Lucky by Trelina Pucci. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I read this one on my Kindle, and this one is very spicy. It is very spicy. So it is set in Las Vegas, and it opens up on an epic walk of shame. This woman has just left the apartment of the multiple guys that she hooked up with, and she's talking on the phone with her sister or her best friend or something, and just kind of going on and on about the night. And it's pretty funny because it's just so insane, her walk of shame and everything that happened there. And one of the things that happened was that she got married. And so the idea was that she would get a quickie divorce. Well, she married a pro football player, and the judge doesn't like the team that the football player plays for, because he likes the team, and this player is about to switch teams, and he knows it. So he forces the two to live together for 30 days in Vegas. And these two characters have an amazing chemistry, and they cannot keep their hands off each other. But the football player has two best friends, and so basically they have a whole deal where all three of them hook up with the same woman all the time, all together. And I mean, I was kind of uncomfortable reading a lot of this. Like, let me see how it was described. It was, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot. It's not for the faint of heart, but if you like things really dirty, Not So Lucky maybe for you. Okay, next up I read He's Not My Type by Megan Quinn, and this is part of her series. It's a hockey player series. I can't think of the name of the series right now, but this is like the book 3 or 4 in that, where hockey player teammates are each finding their own love story. So this one is, our hockey players had a longtime crush on a woman that works in their marketing or PR department, and she's always had a boyfriend. Well, the boyfriend and her break up, and his teammates finagle it so that she ends up staying in the extra room in the guy's house that has a crush on her. But they're just friends, and so he has to try to overcome being, put in that friend category, friend zone, and wooing her essentially. And she keeps thinking of him like a brother, so he has to work extra hard for that. He's like the kindest guy ever. So it's a hockey player romance. It's got some steamy scenes, and I don't know what it is about hockey romances, but it's a whole genre in itself. Okay, next I read Resting Scrooge Face by Megan Quinn, same author as that hockey book. This was actually a short story and holiday themed, obviously, Resting Scrooge Face. So it didn't take very long to read. It's kind of a nice little palate cleanser before going on to something else. A woman returns to her hometown. It's very much all about Christmas, and the guy that she had a crush on in high school runs the hardware store, and he's frustrated with all the holidays, and he writes this letter to no one, basically just kind of talking about how angry he is about Christmas and not in the spirit, and a do-gooder mailman finds it in the trash and gives it to our female character, and she takes it upon herself to write back, and they pass notes back and forth through the mailman without actually knowing who the other one is, and you know, meet up and fall in love. All right, next I read Love at First by Kate Claiborne. This was a sweet romance where two people met as kids, but they didn't actually meet. They kind of like saw each other or didn't see each other, but anyway, starts out with kind of that teenage meeting, and then later in the book they end up living in the same apartment building. So it's all about this community that's in this apartment building, where the guy inherits his uncle's space, but he didn't have a good relationship with his uncle or the rest of his family, so he wants really nothing to do with it. And the woman has inherited her grandmother's apartment in the same building, and she's very much connected to the building and the community there, and they're mostly elderly people. And so there's this, you know, battle of him wanting to get rid of it or rent it out, and her wanting to make sure the community stays as a whole, and how they end up overcoming their differences and falling in love. All right, next up is Snowed In by Catherine Walsh. And this is also holiday adjacent. You'll sense a theme. It was December. I was in the spirit. Okay, so Snowed In, there's a man and a woman that knew each other in high school. The woman was supposed to get married and did a runaway bride situation, and really hasn't been back to her hometown since because she's ashamed, and that's the story that everybody associates with her. The guy has also left his hometown because he always felt like he was having to prove himself to his family, and they end up meeting each other in, I think they were in Dublin. They end up meeting each other at a bar in Dublin and talking, and then deciding to fake a relationship. There's your trope. Fake a relationship for their home trip for Christmas so that they can get everybody off their backs. And as you can imagine, they fall in love. But there's a lot of back and forth, you know, to get there because of her family and his family, and how all of that works, but the premise is cute, and I enjoyed it for the holidays. The last book in romance and of this December read is Homecoming King by Penny Reed. This is part of a series. I will not probably read the rest of the series. Homecoming King was kind of okay. I mean, it was, again, kind of a hometown situation. The woman, set in Austin, Texas, the woman is working at a bar in their hometown, and a professional football player who she went to high school with comes into the bar drunk, and she has to help get him home. He doesn't really remember her. She definitely remembers him because she was obsessed with him their entire period of growing up. So he ultimately asks if she'll be in a fake relationship with him, if she'll marry him, and he'll pay her to be his wife because he doesn't want to date. He has this history of everyone he dates gets married to one of his best friends. He's like a training wheels, that's his nickname, for all of his dates that ultimately get married in their next relationship. And again, they ultimately fall in love, but to get there is a process. I didn't love this book, to be honest with you, which is why I'm not going to read the rest of the series. But you know, if you like Texas and, you know, football romances and fake relationships, maybe it's for you. All right, that's it. Those are the 19 books I read in December. Happy January reading.